Today, we are diving into one of the most provocative and influential works of political philosophy ever written, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. Published all the way back in 1651, this book offers a pretty radical, and for many, a pretty scary solution to the problem of how we all live together. All right, so let's just start by looking at this thing. This is one of the most famous title pages in history. And trust me, it is not just for decoration. Every single detail you see here, which was created by Abraham Bosse with Hobbes' own input, holds a key to unlocking a powerful and, frankly, a terrifying theory of government.
And really, that's the question that sits at the heart of it all, isn't it? Why would anyone argue that the best shot we have as a species is to willingly submit ourselves to an all-powerful artificial superbeing, a Leviathan? Well, to get the answer, we have to understand the unbelievably chaotic world Hobbes was desperately trying to make sense of.
So first up, let's take a closer look at this so-called monster and the historical storm it was born from.
You've got to remember, Hobbes wasn't just writing this from a comfy, peaceful study. He was living through the English Civil War, a time of absolute brutality and political collapse. Seeing his society literally crumble around him convinced him that the greatest possible evil is civil war. His entire philosophy, the whole thing, is designed to prevent that from ever happening again, at any cost.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. If you look closely, really closely, at the sovereign's body, you see it's not a single entity at all. It's made of over 300 individual people. And here's the kicker. They're all looking up, towards the head of the sovereign. This isn't some monster that's conquered them. It's a monster they have all built together.
Okay, so that's the monster they created. But to really get why they would do such a thing, we have to look at what Hobbes thought life was like without it, what he called our natural state.
Hobbes asked us to imagine a time before government, a state of nature. And you don't have to imagine too hard, just think of a failed state, or the way nations interact on the world stage. In this condition, he said everyone has a right to everything. But since we all want the same stuff, and there's not enough to go around, it just leads to a constant state of conflict. What he famously called a war of all against all.
And his description of life in that state of war, well, it's one of the most chilling and famous lines in all of philosophy. He says that without a common power to keep us all in awe, there's no progress, no art, no society. There's just constant fear and the ever-present danger of a violent death.
So here's the crucial insight. Hobbes said, look, we can argue all day long about what the greatest good is. We'll never agree. But we can all agree on the greatest evil, the summum malum, and that is the fear of being violently killed. That universal fear, he argued, is the only solid foundation you can build a society on.
So if you're stuck in this miserable, brutish existence, how do you get out? Hobbes' way out isn't through faith or the divine right of kings. Nope. It's through a cold, hard, rational bargain.
He lays out a pretty logical process. First, you and everyone else realize that the state of nature is completely unbearable. Second, you all agree to give up your natural freedom to just do whatever you want. And third, this is the big one, you transfer all that power to a single entity, a sovereign, whose one and only job is to protect you. That's the social contract.
This quote right here, this is basically the fine print of the deal. It's every single person saying to every other person, okay, look, I will give up my right to be my own boss, but only if you do the same. It's this mutual promise, this collective act that breathes life into the great Leviathan.
So, the contract is signed. But what kind of ruler does this create? Let's be very clear, we are not talking about a president with checks and balances. What Hobbes designed was something way, way more powerful.
Let's go back to that image. The Leviathan is holding two things. In one hand, a sword, that's earthly, civil power. In the other, a crozier, that's church or ecclesiastical power. For Hobbes, these two things could never, ever be separated. If they were, they'd become rivals, and you just end up right back in a civil war. The sovereign must control both.
And the artwork just spells this all out. The panels below that main figure show the tools of power. On the left, the stuff of government, castles, cannons, crowns. On the right, the stuff of religion, churches, courts, arguments. The Leviathan stands above it all, in charge of the whole shebang.
And when we say power, we mean total power. Hobbes says the sovereign gets to decide what ideas are too dangerous to talk about, gets to make the rules for property, gets to make war, and yes, even gets to censor the press. For Hobbes, this power had to be absolute. Any division, any limit was just a crack in the dam waiting to burst and send everyone back to that horrible war of all against all.
Now, technically, the sovereign could be a group, like an assembly. But Hobbes, he was a fan of monarchy. His reasoning was actually pretty practical. A monarch's personal interests, their wealth, their power, are directly tied to the country's strength. If the people prosper, the king prospers. But in a democracy or aristocracy, he worried that leaders might be tempted to enrich themselves at the public's expense.
So, you can imagine, this radical defense of absolute power didn't make him very popular. But why are we still talking about a book written over 370 years ago?
I think this quote from the historian Hugh Trevor Roper just nails it. It perfectly captures why the book is so powerful and so controversial. The starting point, the axiom, is fear. The method is cold, hard logic. And the conclusion? Despotism. That is a really tough pill to swallow, the idea that the price of peace might be an all-powerful dictator.
And that is why Hobbes is inescapable. His work forces every single generation to wrestle with this fundamental trade-off. Every time there's a crisis, a war, a terrorist attack, a pandemic, we hear echoes of Hobbes. We start debating how many of our individual liberties we're willing to give up for the sake of collective security. It's the question at the heart of all politics.
Ultimately, Leviathan leaves us with this giant, unsettling paradox. To escape the fear of being hurt by anyone and everyone, we agree to create one source of absolute power to fear instead. We build an artificial God to protect us from ourselves. But that leaves us with the final, haunting question. Who protects you from your protector? How much power is too much, even when it's in the name of peace? That is the shadow the Leviathan still casts over all of us today.